Good, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much as always for joining. Before I start, I just want to say that a few hours before the Shiur, I heard the sad news, exceptionally sad news of the Patira of Rabbi Irving Jacobs, Yitzchok ben Shlomo. He's the father of our member Shoshana Waldman, the father-in-law of Gedalia. He was a remarkable Rav and phenomenal teacher, a very gifted and animated teacher of Torah, a master of Midrash, an exceptional giant of understanding of Chazal and Midrashim, able to really bring the depth and the beauty of the text alive through his teachings, which were exceptionally meaningful, beautiful, and creative. He was really the paradigm of an engaging teacher in terms of his breadth of knowledge, his subject knowledge, his depth, and just the whole way he gave it over. He was really a giant of Anglo Jewry and a phenomenal Talmid Chacham and scholar. I had the privilege of getting to know him when I was giving Shiur and when I was teaching on the Montefiore Smicha program. I was giving Shiur to the Smicha students in the Montefiore Kollel. And I was teaching Halacha, and he used to teach Midrash and Chazal to the students. And I used to, sometimes when I was able, when my timing allowed me to do so, I used to sit into his shiurim and listen to them. I also had the great pleasure and privilege of giving him lifts home very often. I think he used to get a taxi home often, and sometimes I managed to deprive the taxi driver of his business and instead take him home myself. He wasn't just a phenomenal teacher of Torah, he was someone who was interested and engaged with everyone. He made everyone feel special. He had a sweetness of personality, a warmth and a friendliness, a real sort of beauty of soul. He davened for many years in the Wembley Shul. Later he was the Rav in the David Ishak synagogue. And I spoke to people who remember him when they were growing up, who knew him as a sweet man who used to speak to the children, used to give out sweets, and they at the time didn't appreciate what a wonderful Talmid Chacham he was. But of course he was a phenomenal master of that chelek of Torah. So this is Yitzchok ben Shlomo, Yehi Zichro Baruch, may his memory be a blessing, and I want to dedicate this Shiur and the exposition of Midrash, which I'll engage in today, Le'ilui Nishmat Rabbi in memory and for the elevation of his pure soul, and to wish his wife and family, and of course Shoshana and Gedalia Waldman and their children, that they should find nechama, that they should find comfort and condolence in his wonderful memory and his legacy in the Torah and the recordings that live on. There's much more to be said about him. This is, as I said, I really just heard this a short amount of time before the Shiur. But I can't start the Shiur without mentioning him and dedicating it in his memory. The Shiur will be slightly shorter than usual. Unfortunately, I've come down with a winter cough. I'll try and make it through as much of the Shiur as I can without a coughing fit. It's not a COVID cough, thankfully, but nonetheless, I may cut it a little short, so please forgive me in advance. Also, before I go further, just to ask everyone please to follow the shul emails or WhatsApp groups about timings over the next few weeks with Hanukkah, and then a winter break when I hope to take a few days off. Things may be a little less regular than usual for the next few weeks before we resume the weekly regularity after the December holidays. Finally, I mentioned last week that I had some Zoom problems and one of the shiurim recording had gone missing. Thankfully, I managed to recover that. That is up on our YouTube channel again. I mention that simply because I know some people want to hear the halacha section, particularly at times when they're unable to hear it. So that recording is back up. Enough of an introduction. On to the Torah that we are learning over here. I posted on the chat group the handout, the source sheet that we'll be learning from, and the pasuk that I want to look at is a very simple pasuk right at the beginning of the Sedra. VaYaishev Yaakov be'eretz mugurei Aviv be'eretz Canaan. Yaakov dwelt in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. Eila told us Yaakov, these are the generations of Yaakov, or perhaps Rashi translates it as the events that occurred to Yaakov. Yosef ben Shavayis Rishona, Yosef was 17 years. Hayoroyas Achiv Baton, he would shepherd with his brothers the flocks, and so the story carries on with the events of Yosef. Now Rashi picks up on a couple of incongruities in the language. The first is the phrase VaYaishev Yaakov. Yaakov dwelt be'eretz Mugurei Aviv. Interesting use of language which Rashi picks up on. And also the Ada told us Yaakov. These are the generations of Yaakov, which is the normal way of translating that phrase. But then the only generation, the only offspring of Yaakov that it lists is Yosef. So Rashi gives several ways of dealing with this. If we have a look at Rashi on the source sheet underneath the pasuk on page 1, Eila told us Yaakov, these are the generations of Yaakov. Eila Shel told us Yaakov, these are those of the generations of Yaakov. This is the stories about the generations of Yaakov, Yeshuvayim, the Golgotosayim, the settlements, the events that occurred to them, Ad Shabbat Chal Yeshuv, till they came to a point of settlement. Sibur Rishona, Yosef ben Shavayis Rishona. The first cause of the whole story is Yosef, who's 17. So in the first Peshat Rashi brings, of course, Yosef is not the only descendant of Yaakov. Yosef is, it simply means these are the events that occur to Yaakov, but there's much more that needs to be said on of the events. It singles out Yosef simply because he is at the start of the events that occur to Yaakov. So this is Rashi's first way of interpreting the pasuk. Rashi then brings another explanation which I didn't print in the source sheet, in which Rashi says that this is Yosef is the primary descendant of Yaakov. He is the one who in most reflects Yaakov, he's most similar to Yaakov, and that's the second pshat that Rashi gives in the pasuk. But then Rashi quotes a further midrashic explanation, not the pshat in the pasuk, but a midrashic explanation of the pasuk. And Rashi quotes the Bereshis Rabbah, the so-called Genesis Rabbah, the one of the significant midrashim on the Torah, and it picks up on this word VaYaishev, Yaakov dwelt, and it says V'od nidrash bo. So at the second half of Rashi in source 2, or Medrash Agada Dorish, the Bereshis Rabbah, the Medrash Agada and Bereshis Rabbah says as follows. V'od nidrash bo, it's interpreted as follows, a midrashic explanation. VaYaishev, Yaakov settled. Bikesh Yaakov leishev b'shalva. Yaakov wished to dwell in peace. Kofat zolav rogue social Yosef. And then the troubles of Yosef, the anger of Yosef sprung upon him. Tzadikim, the righteous, mevakshim leishev b'shalva. They want to dwell in peace. Omar Kodesh Baruch Hu, says Hashem, lo daim the tzadikim, mashem sukkam lahem le'olam haba. Isn't enough for the righteous that which is set aside for them, established for them in the world to come. Elashim mevakshim leishev b'shalva ba'olam hazeh, that they also want to live in peace in this world. I'm not interested in that, says Hashem. Tzadikim have enough reward in the world to come. They don't need reward, they don't need peace and shalva and tranquility in this world. VaYaishev Yaakov, Yaakov dwelt, Yaakov bikesh leishev b'salva. He wished to dwell, he wished to settle down. Leishev has connotations of settling down, tranquility, being at peace. However, this isn't Hashem's master plan for the world, for Yaakov. This isn't what Hashem wanted of Yaakov. Now, obviously, there's a number of thoughts that spring to mind around this medrash. The first thought is the medrash telling us that shalva, peacefulness and tranquility, is bad? Is this not the path of tzadikim? Isn't this the path of tzadikim? Is it not appropriate for them to enjoy some shalva, some tranquility, some peace? This is perhaps rather depressing, that they're not able to dwell in peace. Is this the impact of the medrash? Secondly, why did Yaakov want it if Hashem didn't? Was Yaakov wrong to have wanted peace? Was it inappropriate? Was it incorrect for him to wish to dwell in peace? If Hashem didn't want it, why did Yaakov, Bikesh Yaakov, Losheves, Beshalva, why did Yaakov want to dwell in peace? Now, interestingly, there's a number of Gemaras that discuss, and this really opens up a whole broader discussion about what is meant to be the relationship of tzaddikim, of righteous people, to this world. And there's many references I could have brought on this topic, one of which is the Gemara in Horios, the Gemara in source 2 that I printed, which is a Gemara in Horios, which seems to say that there is nothing, well, it seems to bring perhaps a machlokas amoraim, a debate in the Gemara itself about the appropriateness of a tzaddik, a righteous person, enjoying life in Olam HaZeh. And it comes off a pasuk in Koheles, in which the pasuk says, Yesh hevel asher nasa al ha'oretz. There is hevel, a vanity, which is performed upon the earth. And the context of the Gemara is that the Gemara believes that the word asher, that, is used when there's something positive. That something positive happens, as opposed to lest or pen, that which something negative happens. So the Gemara is troubled by how there can be a hevel of vanity on the earth, which is a positive. And the Gemara answers that there are righteous people to whom it happens to them, shemagia aleim k'maiser hashoim, to whom it happens to them in this world according to the experience of the wicked in the world to come. In other words, happy are the righteous, asher, happy are the righteous, who experience suffering in this world. And oilahem l'rashoim, woe unto the wicked, who experience a good life in this world, to enjoy this world. This is the first opinion in the Gemara. Omar Rava, the second paragraph in the Gemara, Rava says a second opinion. Otsu tzadiki I ochli trei alma misani lehu. Why would it bother Hashem if tzadikim eat and enjoy two worlds? Why should the righteous suffer in this world? Rather, Rava says, El Amar Rava, Ashreim l'tzadikim shemagi aleim k'maiser hashoim shalom hazeh. Happy are the experience who can live as good a life as the wicked in this world, meaning they can enjoy the world as much as the wicked do. Why should a righteous person not be able to enjoy life also? So Rava is of the opinion that there's no reason why righteous people shouldn't be able to enjoy a peaceful and good life. What's wrong with having a peaceful and good life? Why shouldn't a righteous person be able to enjoy it? Indeed, there's a whole the idea of a person being able to enjoy a peaceful life would seem to be a positive. If we look in source 4, this is a Mishnah in Sanhedrin, in which the Mishnah says that the death of the wicked is beneficial to them and beneficial to the world, because they are no longer able to sin, and the world is rid of those who are sinning. However, for a tzaddik, the death of a tzaddik isn't good for them. The death of a tzaddik is not good for them, not good for the world, because they lose their ability to continue to do amazing things and enhance themselves and the world. And then it carries on the Mishnah that yayin, v'shena, wine and sleep are good for Rishoim. Wicked people, it's good for them to sleep, to no longer be active, and that way not be able to disturb and distract and do damage. A tzaddik, however, it's a pity for them to not be able to be active the whole time. Sleep deprives the world of their ability to benefit it. And so it carries on. Sheket, peacefulness. This is the last few lines in the Mishnah. R'shayim ra'lahem v'ra'la olam. For Rishoim is bad for them and bad for the world. A Rasha who enjoys a peaceful life is able to get on and do all the terrible things they want to do. However, a tzaddik, a righteous person, hana lehem hana olam. It's good for them and good for the world that they should be able to enjoy peace and tranquility. So this seems to be telling us the opposite of this idea in the Midrash that Rashi cites, in which it seems to say that Yaakov is wrong for seeking tranquility. We can understand why Yaakov seeks tranquility. Yaakov has all sorts of things that he wishes to achieve, and tranquility allows him to do so. Disrupted, stressful life interrupts his ability to grow spiritually and achieve things which he wants to achieve. Indeed, what happens to Yaakov? Rogue social Yosef, the anger of Yosef, the terrible story of what happens to Yosef. This causes Yaakov endless heartbreak. It causes him endless terrible pain and misery. For 22 years, Yaakov is cut off from his family, cut off from Yosef. Yosef is cut off from his family. Chazal tell us for 22 years, Yaakov is unable to experience nevuah. He's unable to experience prophecy because he's in pain. And a pain constricts one and narrows one. When one's in pain, one is solely focused on one's own internal experiences. One isn't focused on being able to broaden and focus outwards. And Yaakov is even detached from nevuah, from prophecy, which is part of the pain that Yaakov feels. So we are not people that celebrate pain. We're not people that celebrate distraction and lack of tranquility. So what is Rashi coming to teach us over here? So this is the question. Interestingly and fascinatingly, the source of Rashi is a Medrash Rabbah. But let's look in source 3 and see what Rashi says about the Medrash. Because what the Medrash itself says. Because in source 3, the Medrash says something very different. Let's learn the Medrash together in source 3. Omar Rav Acha, B'shasha Sadikim Mevakshim Leishiv B'shalva B'olam Hazeh. When the Sadikim wish to dwell in tranquility in this world, Hasoton bar mekatreig v'omer. The Soton comes along, the Satan comes along and says, Lo dayom shu masukan lahem. Isn't it enough le'olam haba that they have a portion in the world to come? Why do they need tranquility? Elo shemavakshim leishiv b'shalva b'olam hazeh. That they also want to dwell in olam hazeh in peace. Why should they have peace if they're going to have olam haba? Why should they have a good life in olam hazeh? So says the Soton. Ela she'imavakshim leishiv b'shalva. They want to dwell in peace. And then the Soton carries on. Teidelacha. We see that this is so. Yaakov Avinu al shebikesh leishiv b'shalva b'olam hazeh wanted to dwell in peace in this world. And nizdavig lo sitzno shal Yosef. The Soton of Yosef, the Satan of Yosef, met Yaakov, and he was not able to fulfill his dream of dwelling in peace. So this is really fascinating, because Rashi tells us that this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, who says to Yaakov, no, you can't dwell in peace. Who are you to ask for a peaceful life when you have Olam Haba, when you have the world to come? In the Midrashic reading, this is the Soton that says this. This isn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. So this is really interesting. Is this a kitrug, an accusation of the Soton? Or is this HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Is this Hashem? And why does Rashi change the Medrash? Now the truth is, we don't know why Rashi changes the Medrash. It's possible that Rashi had a different girsa, he had a different text in the Medrash, and this is merely Rashi reflecting the text that he had in the Medrash. I'm not an expert on manuscripts and the variant readings of the Midrashim, and whether an alternative version of the Medrash has been found, which possibly is the source of Rashi in reading this Medrash. It's possible Rashi tweaks the Medrash. And anyone who is familiar with the commentary of Rashi knows that Rashi is not merely one who cuts and pastes from Midrashim. The beauty of Rashi is found in many things. It's found in Rashi's search for Peshat. It's found in Rashi's desire to find Midrashim that fit and enhance the Peshat, in Rashi's sensitivity to the nuance of language, in the selection of Midrashim that he chooses, and also in the subtle tweaks of language in which he can alter a word in a Medrash and give the Medrash a whole new slant and sensitivity to what the Medrash means. So here Rashi may be altering the Medrash language in order to make a point. What is Rashi's point over here? Either because he doesn't see this as the view of the Soton, he sees this as the view of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or because he doesn't want us to misunderstand this. Because ultimately, even though we use the metaphor of the Soton, our understanding is that the Soton is a Malach. The Soton, the Yetzer Hara, the force of accusation and negativity and evil within a human being is itself a malach, is itself an agent and a messenger of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a mission from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Satan is not chas v'shalom, some counterforce to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It isn't an alternative sort of devilish evil that counters and fights the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Quite the contrary, the Satan is a malach, a messenger of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is doing an agency for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We humans need to be challenged. We humans need to be stretched and face sometimes difficulties and struggles and nisyonos, and we need to overcome them. In last week's Sedra, we read an encounter that Yaakov had with some sort of concretized expression of the Satan. We read about Yaakov's wrestling with the Malach, with this mysterious Ish, this being that he encounters, which by the end of the story we understand is some sort of heavenly force. You wrestled, you struggled with a godly force. We understand by the end of the story this is a Malach. How exactly we understand the story, literally, metaphorically, prophetically, nonetheless, Yaakov encounters what the Midrash understands to mean the sorrow shall Esav, the force of Esav. And there's a very interesting twist in the story, because at the end of the story, Yaakov holds the Malach, he holds the angel, and the angel says to Yaakov, release me, ki olah hashacha, release me because dawn has come. Now, why is dawn coming a reason to be released? Says Rashi, quoting from the Midrash, and I believe I cited it last week, a year ago, just over a year ago when we learnt the Parsha. Says Rashi, the Malach turns to Yaakov and says, you have to release me, because each Malach has one chance to say Shira, praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this is my turn. My chance of saying Shira, singing my song of praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is this morning, and therefore please let me go. This is my opportunity to say praise to Hashem. And of course, the question we want to ask ourselves is, what bad luck, Dafka, particularly this morning, when Yaakov happens to have wrestled with Esav and is holding it, the Sorish Esav, this heavenly force of evil, and is wrestling with it and holding it, just by sheer bad luck, this is the one day when the angel has to say Shira to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the answer to the question is, an angel says Shira, sings a song of praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through fulfillment of its mission. An angel is a messenger carrying out the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world. The Rambam tells us that the forces of nature, the Ruach, the Pasuk says, can be a Malach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Oisa Malach of Ruchos, the Ruach, the wind, the forces of science, the forces of nature, are also the messengers of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world. Every messenger, every part of the world that does a message for HaKadosh Baruch Hu sings Shira, gives praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu when its mission is completed, when it does its task. That is the praise it brings to Hashem. Now, when does the Yetzer Hara fulfill its task? When it is beaten. When it challenges someone who manages to overcome it. And therefore it's not coincidence that on the morning of Yaakov encountering this force, after having overcome it, after having been the human being who wrestled the whole deep, dark night of challenges and distance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and overcomes the negativity, overcomes the Satan and the Yetzer Hara, on that night, Yaakov, the Malach, is finally reached the culmination, the expression of its mission, and therefore on that night, the next morning, this is the time for the Malach to sing Shira. And therefore, perhaps this is Rashi's sensitivity and why he's altering the language of the Midrash, because he doesn't want us to misread the Midrash as somehow implying this is something that a Satan does to challenge human beings counter to the will of Hashem Chas v'Shalom. No, the Satan is the Malach, ultimately the spokesman, the voice piece of Hashem himself, and therefore this is the Satan, called Hashem, which says it isn't good for tzaddikim le'shev b'shalva. However, if this is the case, why is it that it isn't good for tzaddikim le'shev b'shalva? Why should they not dwell in peace? There's a Gemara that tells us, let me just see if I put it on the source sheet. No, I should have put it on the source sheet, and I didn't. The Gemara tells us, Tzadikim, ein lahem menucha, Tzadikim, Talmid Chacham, ein lahem menucha, lo ba'olam hazeh, v'lo ba'olam haba. They don't have Melacha, neither in this world nor in the next world. So this Medrash, this language of Chazal, is even more depressing. This language of Chazal seems to be telling us that Talmid Chacham, righteous people, don't even have Melacha in the world to come. They don't even have Melacha in Olam Haba. So what are we meant to make of this? Why is Melacha, why is Shalva, why is tranquility something which Hashem doesn't want us to have? And the answer to this question, the core answer to this question, is that life is about change. Life is about motion. Life is about movement, and life is about growth. One of the ways of understanding all choice that we face in life is whether to be passive or active. Every time we follow our instinct, every time we follow our automatic reaction, every time we follow the natural drives implanted in a human being, the drives of selfishness or ego or laziness or the instinct to anger, every time we follow our instinctive reaction, we're not exercising proactively free will. We're not expressing that which is alive in ourselves. And this is why there's a running refrain, and I printed this in the last source on the page, a running refrain in the Torah in which it describes the correct decisions to make as choosing life. And this is a sample of the psukim, many psukim that we could choose. Es hashamayim v'haaretz, I call heaven and earth to witness that I've set in front of you chayim and modes, life and death, habracha v'klala, blessing and curse, ubacharta b'chayim leman tichya ata v'zarecha. You should choose life in order to live. So what does this pasuk mean? Why is choosing that which is right synonymous with choosing life? And the answer is because all mistakes, all wrong decisions are following the instinct, following the default setting, allowing ourselves to be gripped by the forces beyond ourselves and be blown like leaves in the wind. When we get angry, we are allowing the situation to rule over us. When we're lazy, we're allowing the situation to rule over us. When we follow greed and lust, we're allowing the situation to rule over us. Rather than us mastering the situation and mastering ourselves, we're allowing the situation to command us. The apple calls to us and says, see me, how good I am, how tasty I am, be drawn after me. The anger says, what a terrible situation it is, I'm going to destroy this. What we think of as decision making, bechira, is really the choice between non-decision, going with the default setting, allowing the situation to control us, or us proactively exercising bechira and making a decision. And ultimately, therefore, the choice the Torah wants us to make is to be alive, to actively choose the decisions we make, to actively choose how to respond to a situation rather than allowing the situation to fall over us. And this is the answer to why, on the one hand, Yaakov sees Shalva, Yaakov sees peace as something desirable. He sees peace as Yemos HaMashiach. Peace is a time, a messianic era, a dreamed upon era, in which he's able to do everything that he is right, everything that is right, without distraction, without being disturbed. But we're not yet living in Yemos HaMashiach. Without the challenge of difficulty, without the challenge of stress, without the challenge of challenges, of darkness, of a rogos shel Yosef, Yaakov will never be able to maximize his potential. He'll never be able to be everything he could be. The story of one part of the story of Adam being driven out of Gan Eden is that a beautiful life, a life of a paradise, a life of a Gan Eden and a garden of delights, is brilliant and wonderful if one is able to maximize it. But the challenge and the danger it presents is that of passivity, is that of going with the flow. And this is what's abhorrent to the Torah. The Torah wants us to have nothing more than life. And therefore, tzaddikim ein lehem menucha, not Talmid Chacham ein lehem menucha, they don't have rest, they don't have shalva, not just in this world, but even in the world to come. Even in the world to come is Eretz HaChaim, is the land of life, is a situation of motion and fluidity and direction and change, because non-change is misa, non-change is death, and this isn't what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants for us. And therefore, ultimately, in Rashi's reading, whether this is the Satan that says it or whether this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu that says it, makes no difference. Because either way, this is the essence of what a human being is meant to be. So this is a short insight into this Medrash that Rashi quotes and the fascinating phenomena that Rashi alters and tweaks the language of the Medrash in order to tell us something of greater depth that is going on over here. I want to use the remaining part of the Shiur to continue talking about the Melacha of Havara, and hopefully also have time to talk about its twin, which is the Melacha of Mechabeh. Now, Havara, which we discussed last week, is that of lighting fires and flames. Probably one of the most common applications of this is in the use of electricity, lighting and electricity itself, perhaps. And we discussed some of the halachas related to that last week. I want to use this as a chance to speak very briefly about Amira LeAkum, instructing a non-Jew on Shabbos to do Melacha for one, asking a non-Jew on Shabbos to do Melacha for one. Now, I want to speak about it for a little bit of time because there's many myths associated with this set of halachos, and therefore it deserves a little bit of explanation. And I think that this Melacha of Mavir is the appropriate time to talk about it because probably this is the most common setup of when one would need or wish to use a non-Jew on Shabbos and ask a non-Jew to do work for one on Shabbos, to do a Melacha that we're not allowed to do. The most common scenarios are if one has left a light on that needed to be switched off, left a light off that needs to be switched on, perhaps one's heating is off and it should be on, or it's on and it should be off. One opens the fridge door and discovers the light is still on and one hasn't turned it off, and one can't therefore access one's fridge or one's freezer on Shabbos. I think these are probably the most common scenarios of Amira LeAkum. The other scenarios of Amira LeAkum are in a medical emergency, if one needs to get an ambulance or a taxi to take one into hospital. And again, this involves the Melachas of Mavir, because as we discussed last week, driving is the other common application of Mavir. Every time one drives, the engine undergoes several thousand revolutions a minute, and several thousand melachas of Mavir, of lighting a fire, occur. Now, there are two rules in Amira LeAkum, in instructing a Amira LeNochri, instructing or asking a non-Jew to do a Melacha on Shabbos. The first issue is that of instructing. The act of asking is something very often not allowed on Shabbos, and there are two reasons for this. The first reason for this is because speaking about Melacha and asking someone to do Melacha on Shabbos, the instruction itself is daber dava, is engaging in inappropriate conversation on Shabbos. The second issue is that since the Melacha is being done by one's non-Jewish friends for one on Shabbos, they are acting as an agent, and though, without going into the details in full, the technicalities of agency don't apply in their fullest extent over here, nonetheless, since they are doing this for one on Shabbos, they are doing the Melacha on Shabbos for one, and therefore it is a shlichus, an agency of sorts, and therefore also problematic. The nafkamina, the difference between the two, by the way, is asking before Shabbos. If one asks before Shabbos, there isn't a problem of daber dov. I'm not speaking on Shabbos about inappropriate things. I'm not turning to my neighbor or my friend on Shabbos and saying, please, can you do something for me? I'm doing it before Shabbos. There's no problem before Shabbos about speaking about these things. Nonetheless, the laws of Amira LeAkum still apply because it will be done on Shabbos. So if I ask my non-Jewish friend or neighbor to do the Melacha for me on Shabbos, to turn the lights on Shabbos, even though I'm asking before Shabbos, since they will do it on Shabbos for me as my agent, this is a problem. On the other hand, the issue of daber dov, of speaking inappropriately on Shabbos, can be resolved by avoiding giving a direct instruction and merely mentioning the problem concerned, and therefore doing it beremes. So we have these two halachic principles, both of which merge into one, that certainly a direct instruction on Shabbos is problematic. This is issue number one with Amira LeNochri, with instructing or asking a non-Jew to do something on Shabbos for one. There is a second prohibition, which is that of benefiting directly from the act which has been done. Meaning to say, any case in which I wasn't allowed to ask for it, even if the non-Jew did it of their own volition, I cannot directly benefit from the act that has been done. And this second aspect of Amira LeAkum is often forgotten about. So hinting is not a get-out-of-jail-free card in this situation. Because even though hinting avoids the direct instruction and perhaps even the agency, nonetheless, I'm still benefiting on many occasions directly from the action that's been done by the non-Jew. And even were they to do so of their own volition, there would be a problem to benefit from the action, from the activity, and therefore I wouldn't be allowed to benefit from it. So let's just work through these, each case by itself. There are cases where Amira LeAkum is allowed. There are cases where it is allowed and appropriate to ask a non-Jew to do a Melacha for one. For example, situations of illness, even though they are non-life-threatening, or situations of significant loss, or extreme discomfort, or perhaps communal need. So examples of these are, as I said, a minor illness, a genuine illness, meaning one's unwell, one's in bed with flu or whatever it may be, but nonetheless not something which is life-threatening. One would be allowed to engage there in Amira LeAkum. Similarly, if it would be very cold, so cold is considered discomfort akin to ill health, and therefore again one would be allowed to directly instruct a non-Jew to do a Melacha for one. Similarly with childcare, children are considered cholim automatically. If they are suffering, it's considered a situation of choli, of ill health, and therefore again one would be allowed to ask a non-Jew to directly do something for one. And finally, as I said, communal needs, a significant need or communal need, we follow the psak, which would allow that one, in that case also, to ask a non-Jew to do a Melacha. That's out in the Minhag in our shul and in many communities. So there are situations where one can directly ask someone to do something. However, there are many situations where one cannot directly ask, and in terms of direct instruction, remez, a hint, would be an appropriate solution. But then one still needs to think, will I be benefiting directly from the act that has been done? And if I will be directly benefiting from the act that has been done, then the fact that I've hinted doesn't help resolve the issue. Because even though I've hinted and I've avoided the instruction aspect, I'm no better off than had the non-Jew chosen to do of their own volition as a favor for me, and it would still be prohibited because I'm not allowed to directly benefit from it. So let's give a couple of examples of this. If the light is on and disturbing sleep, I'm allowed to hint to the non-Jew to turn the light off. Because I'm not instructing, I'm merely hinting. And I'm not directly benefiting from what they're doing because they are removing a problem, the light that's disturbing me, rather than giving me something that benefits me. Similarly, if the fridge light is left on, I can ask them to turn it off because, again, it's removing a problem. I don't really have an interest in the light. I want the light off so that I can open and close the door and remove a problem that's disturbing me. However, if the issue is that I want the light to be turned on, then in that case, unless it has one of the allowances that we discussed before, such as a communal need or health or other such situations, I wouldn't be allowed even to hint to have it turned on because it doesn't resolve the issue. It's true I'm hinting and therefore avoiding direct action. However, when the light is turned on, I'm directly benefiting from the act that's done, and that I still wouldn't be allowed to benefit from the turned on light, unless the benefit is relatively minimal, meaning there was some light shining into the room beforehand, and this is adding light for comfort. In that case, since the benefit is merely an addition of light, I would be allowed to benefit from it. So I simply wanted to use this as a chance to remind ourselves of the halachas of Amira LeAkum, and to realize that whilst Amira LeAkum is allowed as an instruction in certain cases which resolves all the issues, nonetheless, in cases where an instruction isn't allowed, one shouldn't think that hinting is an automatic solution. One still needs to ask oneself, is one directly benefiting from the act that has been done? There can be cases where a non-Jew does a Melacha on Shabbos, but since they are doing it not just for Jews, but they are doing it for everyone, again, this wouldn't be considered benefiting from a Melacha done on behalf of the Jew. So if one's light goes out because of a power cut across the city, and then electricity is restored, one would be allowed to benefit from it because they have done it on behalf of everyone, not just specifically on my behalf. So this is a summary of some of the relevant halachas of Amira LeAkum as applied to the context of electricity and lights and and so on Shabbos, which is probably the most common scenario of Amira LeAkum. Many years ago, I had the beautiful, enjoyable experience of spending some days on holiday in a small town in Switzerland called Montana, small town in Switzerland that you may be familiar with. And it's a town which has a number of, it's a sort of the Bournemouth of that region in Switzerland and across the border into Italy. And many Jews have holiday houses there. During the year, most of the Jews that go there on holiday are Sephardim from Italy. During the summertime, the town gets flooded with Hasidim who go on vacation there, and it becomes a Hasidic town. Now, the Sephardi community that uses the village, the town, for their holidays, has bought or rented a small warehouse, a small sort of basement as a shul to use during the year in an underground car park below a chalet, a block of flats in this town, in this village. And they use it most of the year. And as I said, in the summer, the shul switches to become a Hasidic shul and is used by the Hasidim as their shul. Now, one summer Friday night, the shul was packed with Hasidim who were davening there. And during the course of davening, accidentally, one of the Hasidim leant back on the light switch and switched to the light off in this shul. So they're now all standing in this very dark basement at the back of a dark car park under a block of flats in the dark, trying to continue davening. So they send out a Hasidic kid into the street to try and, in his Yiddish, speak to the German-speaking Swiss, and the region there is more French-speaking than German, but find someone who could understand and communicate with, and ask one of the non-Jewish passers-by to come in and switch on the light. This would be Amira LeAkum. Nonetheless, as I said, it's Tzorech Rabim, and the minhag of many is to follow the psak, that for communal need, this is allowed. And this Hasidic kid found it quite hard to persuade someone to come and turn on the light. A little bit of a weird story, why are you trying to call us to turn on the light? But eventually managed to get someone to turn on the light, to agree to follow them. And they followed him into this underground car park, getting increasingly sort of puzzled and nervous as they're led into this car park towards the back of a dark car park in this basement. And they're beginning to look around a little nervously, and unsure what sort of trap or situation they're being led into. Anyway, eventually he takes him to the basement, where the fellow steps in. The kid indicates to him the light switch. He switches on the light switch, and revealed to him is 90 Hasidim, all standing there, who all say in a loud voice together, Shkoyach! At which point this poor Swiss gentleman jumps 2 foot in the air, panics, switches off the light, and goes running out. This was the story in a Friday night in the Swiss village of Montana. So when one does do Amira LeAkum, one has to be careful that as one leads one's non-Jewish passerby or neighbor into one's house, that they understand what this is all about. Okay, so these are the halachas of Amira LeAkum with application to the Melacha of Havara. If one forgot to turn on a hot tray, someone has posed to me privately, can one hint to a non-Jew to turn it on? The answer is in general not, because this is a positive benefit from a Melacha, and therefore this wouldn't be allowed. Heating food on Shabbos, and therefore getting hot food on Shabbos is a positive benefit. It in principle could involve a Melacha d'oraisa, a Melacha of turning on cooking and heating the food, and turning on the hot plate, and therefore this wouldn't be allowed on Shabbos. In general, having hot food is not considered a big loss, a significant loss, and therefore one wouldn't be able to do so. And as I said, potentially it's a Melacha d'oraisa, a Torah prohibition, and therefore would be a problem. Moving on to discuss a couple of other drabonons associated with Mavir, and then I'll try and very briefly speak about Mechabeh, extinguishing, which is the twin of Mavir. There are two drabonons that I want to discuss, which are relevant over here for the Melacha of Mavir, of lighting fires on Shabbos. The first one is something we've discussed before, which is using hot water on Shabbos. Turning on the hot water tap on Shabbos potentially involves two Torah prohibitions. Depending on how one's boiler is set up, one may be triggering the flame to go up and down, which would be a d'oraisa, a Torah prohibition of Mavir, of lighting a flame on Shabbos. And in addition, again, depending on how one's boiler is set up, one may be introducing cold water into the boiler where it'll get cooked, in which case this is mevashel. As a result of the likelihood of heating water leading to Mavir, there is a drabonon against bathing and showering and swimming in hot water on Shabbos. Can one of you have your screen shown? Just give me a nod or a shake. Did I discuss the drabonon last week I know we discussed previously showering and swimming on Shabbos in a different context, but did I discuss it in terms of the Melacha of Mavir on Shabbos? No, okay. So we've discussed the issues with swimming on Shabbos in a different context when we spoke about Mechabeh Patish, actually a few weeks ago, and making the drabonon against making a float on Shabbos. We're worried that someone will make a float for themselves on Shabbos. And I mentioned then that there are a number of other potential drabonon isurim in swimming or bathing on Shabbos, such as squeezing out one's garments, such as carrying the water from reshus to reshus, and various squeezing out one's hair, and various other isurim. In addition to this, we now meet one of the other drabonons concerned, which is bathing in hot water on Shabbos is prohibited midrabanon because of fear that one will come to heat water on Shabbos. So this is another relevant drabonon for scenarios of bathing and swimming on Shabbos. And as I said, in general, certainly for Ashkenazim, we are very machmir on these things. If there's ever a particular situation with children or with extreme heat, one should ask a personal shaila. But in general, as I said, we take these prohibitions very seriously. A second prohibition is using an oil lamp to read on Shabbos. There is a drabonon against reading by an oil lamp on Shabbos. When one reads, one becomes immersed in the experience of reading, and if the light flickers, one will instinctively twist or turn the oil lamp to increase the oil flow, and therefore they created a drabonon gezerah shamayita, a gezerah against reading close by an oil lamp in case one tilts the oil lamp and causes it to flare up. Unless one has various conditions in place, like having the oil lamp further away or someone there who watches over one to make sure one doesn't accidentally do this. The view of the vast majority of poskim is that this gezerah does not apply with electric lamps. Even an electric lamp, which is a lamp, and therefore is a fire, nonetheless it's not an oil lamp, and one can't alter the quality of the light by shifting the angle of the oil flow, and therefore this gezerah does not apply. And this applies even with a light with a dimmer, where you could alter the volume of the light, or a light with a switch. According to almost all poskim, there's no concerns over here. You don't need to cover the switch with the light. We're not worried that you will switch it on and off on Shabbos in this situation. Similarly, by the way, this gezerah doesn't apply with candles, which don't get tipped to alter their light. It only applies with oil light. So if one ever is using candle light to read by in a romantic dinner on a Friday night, this gezerah wouldn't apply to candle light. So this is the second rabbanon, which I think has halacha has little applicability nowadays. I mention it simply because you may see in some halachic books those that raise concern, but this isn't how we paskin. One is allowed to read by a modern day lamp or lantern, which is electric, even if it's a filament light. So this is the Melacha of Mavir. I want to touch on very briefly the twin of Mavir, which is Mechabeh, which is extinguishing. It has many of the symmetrical relevance, putting out a light, perhaps turning off a car engine, and various other situations like that. But just to give a little bit of halachic background to Mechabeh, and why in general it is more lenient than Mavir, we have discussed before that all melachas need to be creative, positive acts, which means to say that in general, Mechabeh, done for the motives that we normally do Mechabeh for, would not be a Melacha d'oraisa, would not be a Torah prohibition. Why? Because why do we extinguish a light? Well, either because we don't want it, we don't want the light anymore, or to save electricity or to save fuel, and therefore we put it out. In all these cases, therefore, this is a negative act rather than a positive act, and therefore would be only d'Rabbanan, obviously still prohibited, but without the full force of Torah law. Nonetheless, in practical halacha, obviously not, absolutely not allowed. When would Mechabeh be a creative act? When one is putting something out in order to produce charcoal or charred wood. The only way us urban Jews meet this halacha is with the minhag that many have, that a husband prepares the Shabbos candles on behalf of their wife by lighting them and for momentarily and then blowing them out before Shabbos in order to blacken or char the wick so that when one comes to light it, it lights better. A wick is slightly hard to catch a light because the thread has a slight moisture to it. If one chars it and it carbonizes it, the flame catches more quickly because it's carbonized and moisture is drawn out of it. In the olden days, and for those who still make fires, they used to char wood pre-lighting it for the same reason. And similarly, they produce charcoal, a wood heated to a very high level, and then in a low oxygen environment, and then immediately put out in order to produce a wood which would burn at a very high heat for smelting and things like that. So this is the only, or almost the only example of a positive reason for lighting, for extinguishing, and therefore really the only scenarios of the oraisa cases of this Melacha on Shabbos. Nonetheless, one should be careful not to do the Drabanon. Lowering a gas flame on one's stovetop on Shabbos would be the Drabanon of this. Blowing out a candle, if one has one's Shabbos candles in a position such that when you open and close the door, there's a gust of wind which is likely, or a regular wind could blow out the candles, then this again would be a problem. Perhaps disconnecting an electric current on Shabbos would be this problem, at least Drabanon, perhaps not. And we discussed changing time switches on Shabbos. If the light is on and you alter the time switch so that the light will go off earlier, this again would be Mechabeh. This again would be extinguishing on Shabbos, which would be prohibited as a grama, as garam kiboy, indirect or delayed causation of a Melacha, which would be forbidden on Shabbos. So again, you can adjust the timer to keep a light which is already on for longer. You can adjust a mechanical timer to keep with the teeth timers to keep a light which is off for longer. However, one can't adjust the timer to turn a light on sooner than it was anyway going to turn on, or off sooner than it was going to turn off. The other case where one has Mechabeh relevance is Chas v'Shalom in the case of a fire emergency. Now, in the poskim, there's a lot of discussion about which sort of fires are dangerous and are not dangerous. One wouldn't be allowed to do Mechabeh if this is a fire which will only do damage to property and wouldn't risk any lives. In practical halacha, all these distinctions are almost all irrelevant. Not to put out a fire is clearly playing with potential loss of life, and therefore it's appropriate to put the fire out immediately, unless very, very rare scenarios where it's really self-contained, perhaps a fire in a sink or something like that. But I would be very, very cautious about applying what one sees in poskim to modern day scenarios where one chas v'shalom could really risk life, and the presumption should be that one should treat any fire as a potential pekuach nefesh and put the fire out. If it's a fire which one can extinguish with the shinoi, if it's a very contained fire, maybe one should do so. But even that, I think one has to be very, very careful about doing and risking chas v'shalom allowing the fire to go out of control. And in general, I think the advice is put out the fire as quickly as possible. The discussion of the poskim was in a very different world. in which people lived in stone buildings, in which houses were very widely dispersed. They were living out in villages, in an urban life with electricity and gas around. Any fire has the potential to literally become Pekuach Nefesh. And therefore, I simply mentioned this for those that work their way through Shulchan Aruch and see the various things that the poskim say. One has to be very, very careful about really not applying these halachas nowadays, and understanding that any case of a fire is potentially a pekuach nefesh, and therefore one should immediately, obviously, put it out, and if necessary, call the fire brigade. So I think that draws us to a conclusion with Mechabeh. Someone just posted to me here on the group, can one read by Shabbos candles that become liquid when they get hot? So this is an excellent question, and I thank you actually very much for posing this question. If one uses oil lights for one's Shabbos candles, or one uses lights which become liquid when they get hot, and let's say your time switch has switched off, so it is now dark, you'll set your time switch to go off at 11 o'clock at night, and you are unable to sleep, or you decide to stay up later, and you're absorbed in reading an interesting sefer or an interesting book, then this halacha would apply, and indeed this halacha would apply. One wouldn't be allowed to read close to the light, because this is indeed the Gezerah D'Rabbanan. One would be allowed to read further away, such that one couldn't tilt to the light easily, but one would have to get up and go over to tilt it, because at that point, we're not worried that one would forget it's Shabbos, we're worried about an instinctive action. Now, it is true that with oil lamps, because we don't use them, we're not used to tilting them. Nonetheless, since this is identical to the case where the Gezerah, the rabbinic action, was made, the halacha would apply in this case and wouldn't be able to read right next to the lamp. So thank you for that question. This is a practical application of this halacha. So I'll stop there for today. Baruch Hashem, I managed to get through the shiur without a coughing fit. I wish you all a good week and a Chanukah Sameach, a wonderful Chanukah. We've been learning about the halachas of Mechabeh and Mavir, so obviously please ensure that your menorah is set up safely. And as I said, please check and watch this space in terms of the shul communication, in terms of the program of the shiur going forward over the next few weeks. I wish you all well, and if anyone has any questions they want to ask, obviously please feel free to do so. Thank you so much as always for joining. Really appreciate it.